Transportation of Freight Manual, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. State Coast Guard, Diaz Instruction M46105A, Chapter 2. Cargo routing and movement. A. General. The chapter set forth the policy, procedures, movement of the cargo using commercial military transportation services, traffic management policy. The general rule for selecting mode of the transportation service providers, the shipment items anywhere with the base on requisition, shipping request, urgency, and priority. The goal is obtaining the appropriate quality transportation services at the most economical cost, most urgency, or needed special requirements. International shipments moving to and from OCONOS points of the Viva the commercial service, the Viva the defensive transportation system are found in the chapter 3 of the manual with the Defensive Transportation Regulation Part 2, the same criteria for the routing of the small packaging shipments of those small packages that process and establish government of the transportation service provider, blanket purchase accounts, and commercial forms applied with the described in chapter. Just in this chapter, small packages might meet criteria of obtaining small package and the route of the process, local shipping offices, shipment requiring area, the surface of freight bills, and the i.e. general government billing landings electronically generated with the commercial billing and landing. It must be processed the freight billing and landing as described in this chapter. See also chapter 7 for the freight bills, the landing, and the forms for small package shipments. For any more information for the applicable forms. C. Shipping, billing, and landing for transportation of the U.S. government-owned assets. All shipments of the U.S. government-owned assets for the charge of the paid directly to the transportation service provider must be processed by using the following standard shipping and billing methods of issuing the billing standards, billing and landing, the government billing and landing, the commercial billing and landing using the appropriate government small package of the BPA. Go to the amclg.scotafm.mil/Don-Dome-Express/SPS index using the Defensive Transportation System billing methods of OCONOS Shipment and Air Mobility Command, Military Sea Command Services, and the Defensive Transportation DTR Part 2 Cargo Environment, Public Trans.com, Mill, Government Procedure Policy Movement until the Defensive Transportation System. D. Government purchase credit cards and convenience checks. Purchase cards and convenience checks are also used to obtain paying the shipments only when they are above noted. The standard method is not available for administrative and practical meet the operational maintenance, mission shipping requirements underway. The deployment under the remote shipping areas. All purchase cards of transportation shipping services must be supported with documentation for an audit purposes. Documentation should include the pertinent shipping information, description, item related to the dimensions, applicable special handling, e.g. hazmat, expected agreed, and the charge of documentation shall be maintained for 3 years following the date of shipment as authorized by the Federal Acquisition Regulation, the Coast Guard Simplified Acquisition Procedure, or SAP, Handbook, the Coast Guard Command Instruction, M4D 4213 series government purchase cards. Credit cards may be purchased for payment, shipping, and handling charges for the purchase of supplying and material. E. Freight routing and landing methods. Counter shipper designated billing and landing support centers. The responsibility for providing the freight routing and the billing and landing is the support of the counter shipper. These centers will be issued both electronic bills and landing and government bills. Landing is applicable in the same paragraph 3 below. OCONOS shipper, the government bill landing with the authorized by the OCONOS shipper. The OCONOS shipper must request the bill landing of the services of the OCONOS billing landing support center. General freight. The OCONOS shipper, the Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, supported by the billing landing support should be in contact with the General Service Management Transportation Travel Officer for the routing of non-classified, non-sensitive, non-army ammunition explosive shipments. GSA Transportation Travel Hours offices from 0630 to 1800 Pacific Time. Telephone 415 55 22 280 2830 280 467 Pacific Rim GSA Government FSS Freight. Classified sensitive arms, ammunition, explosives, or AA and E shipments. The Coast Guard, OCONOS shippers of the contact of military surface deployment distribution command, the routing of the classified sensitive army, ammunition, explosive shipment. For the further information regarding the policy contacting the transportation freight of the program management, 202-267-0640. See the chapter 4 for this manual for the more information shipping of the item type of the items. Identifying designated bill and landing support center. Appendix A and the Appendix E of the listing of the bill landing of the support Center. The transportation officer, transportation agent may also identify the unit of the bill landing support center consulting the economist for freight shipment supporting the center listed under the transportation or each contact the transportation freight program manager. Routing internal cargo. The bill landing of the support center with the contact the SDCCC at 800-526-1465 to obtain the freight routing assistance for the shipment. International designation for the commercial air freight services using the defensive transportation system, military airlift or sea lift transportation services. OCONUS international freight shipment using the government billing landing authorized the shipment of OCONUS to points non-U.S. designated points of the Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. However, electronic transportation acquisition can also should be used and provided with the courier error routing account to the U.S. OCONUS, Arkansas, and Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and points Alaska and Hawaii, Puerto Rico for custom clearance points of the government bill landing should be used with the freight shipment and internal points of the non-U.S. destinations. Underway cutter. The underway cutter of the transportation officer, transportation agent should contact the designated area of the MLC support desk guidance for the route of the freight shipment. F. General cargo routing criteria. The transportation officer, transportation agent shall route the general commodity shipment of the motor rail, water in accordance with the Department of Defense GSA traffic management policy. The guidance for the use of the government-owned assets of the transportation material contained within paragraph 9 of the chapter using both values following the consideration mode of the transportation service provider. Urgency needed for the reliability mode for the meeting shippers required delivery date, the cost of transportation service, the shipping, receiving facilities, origination, destination, including material handling, docking, capability, availability, suitability of the transportation service provider, equipment and transportation services, weight of the property shipped, dimension of the property shipped, oversized and outsized unusual items, characteristics of the need support, additional services, special protective requirements of the hazardous material, classified items, value of the property being shipped, refer to the Chapter 6 of the Manual Import Information Guidance of the Transportation Service Provider. Preparation of the description consolidation frame. The transportation officer, the transportation agent will ensure the cargo packed labeled described in this shipment documented in accordance with the manual and other applicable regulations, also consolidated with the shipment maximum extent of the possible where practical. It is always recommended to reconsider consolidation of the items in a single shipment to advantage to the lower pound per rate for specified destinations. Export shipments. Refer to Chapter 3 for this manual. All export shipments must conform internal custom requirements of the IAWDTS procedures. Emergency routing authority. In instance of emergency disaster catastrophe shipments may be made by any transportation without obtaining routing number orders from the GSA commandment, the GC Coast Guard Commander 44-1 SDDC as or the SDDC as following apply. Select the transportation service provider provided with the Department of Defense required. Approve the necessary security and control services of controlled sensitive shipment. The selected transportation service provider is now known to be either the Department of Defense, GSA, approved the transportation service provider to move the U.S. government freight and non-sensitive shipments. J. The deviation of the normal routing, the shipper shall keep these supporting documentation justifies the reason for the emergency routing of the documentation shall cap the associated shipments with the applicable cost reference. K. National emergency. In the case of the national emergency, guidance will be provided with the commandment of the Coast Guard 44-1 in coordination with the SDDC using multiple appropriate and practical official communication method. L. Undeliverable shipments. When a transportation agent is advised the shipment will not be delivered because of the natural disaster and labor dispute, other such condition, the transportation officer and agents will determine the disposition instruction needed to be issued. When necessary, the transportation officer and transportation agent will coordinate with the appropriate shipping and receiving authority for the disposition instruction. The disposition communication can be done by the phone when following up the email documentation instruction via the official message. Contacting transportation freight manager at the 202-267-06400. 0640. Further guidance. M. Government-owned transportation assets. Government-owned transportation equipment via vans, tractor trailers can be used in the short distance movement of normally delivery points confined with the 50-mile radius of the original shipment. Government-owned transportation equipment can be used to provide essential transition operational personnel to meet the logistics need for the consistent development of military capabilities except for the authorized paragraph 1. Government-owned transportation equipment shall never be used solely to avoid the available commercial carrier services. Circumstances during the emergency may dictate the government-owned transportation equipment in lieu of the addition of the commercial services. When the OK announced Theater the policy to maximize the government-owned but the transportation equipment, the commercial transportation requirements exceed with the capability of government-owned assets. When the government-owned transportation equipment is used for shipment of material between the Coast Guard units and the copies of the basic issue, the document, the DoD Form 1149 or local approved document should be utilized to control the safeguard of material movement, ensure the necessary material recipient procedures are modified and per established supply procedures. And demurrage, detention, and storage. The Transportation Office transportation agent must be familiar with the STDC freight traffic of the GSA national rules. Tender the number 100D, demurrage, detention, and storage to take appropriate action to keep charges to minimum. The Transportation Office, the transportation agent will activity of the commander shipping, the activity of the consigning condition that may access the charge assistant determining correct charges will provide with the STDC GSA and appropriate. The diversion or the reconsignment, the terms of consideration is synonymous with either the name of the change of the name of the consignee, change of the place of the consigner, or change of the place of delivery, original destination, point of the change of destination. The change take place after the release of the shipment of the transportation service provider, prior to delivery of the shipment of the transportation service provider. Any diversion or reconsignment may result in additional cost to the Coast Guard shipper than bill. Landing correction notice is required and explained in Chapter 7 of the manual. 1. Domestic intra-theater shipments, the transportation office or transportation agent will issue diversion of reconsignment instructions directly to the transportation service provider. International or inter-theater shipment of the transportation office or transportation agent will obtain an approval for the appropriate clearance authority prior to the issuing of the diversion or reconsignment instruction to the transportation service provider. P. Tracking and tracing. Tracer and tracking actions. When shipment is delivered with the required delivery date, when uniform material movement in the issue priority system, UMIPS, and time standard of the DTR Part 2, the shipment of the consignment will initiate the tracer action when the tracer service is required, but the request must be placed on the transportation office or the transportation agent directly to the transportation service provider. Defensive transportation systems, the shipment, transiting the Department of Transportation system include both international domestic shipments, process Department of Defense shipping systems, route cargo movement tracking. The tracing must be accomplished by using the Global Transportation Network. The Global Transportation Network provides the command control and transit visibility information integrates with the automated information support to the Department of Defense. The Global Transition Network may be obtained through the Global Transition Network website, businesstranscom.mil. Select transportation information from the sidebar item to refer to the DTR Part 2, Chapter 202 for the further information regarding the tracing and tracking of the shipping data process captured from the Department of Defense shipping system and move the Department of Transportation system. Defense Transportation System. Expedited services. When a shipment is urgently needed with the destination, expedited services may be used and additional charges will incur. Exclusive use. Request for the exclusive use service of the carrier. The equipment should only be made when required for the security control reason. The service is extremely expensive and shall not be used in expedited material. S. Transit. The Department of Defense and the UMIPS time standard applied. See the DTR Part 2 GSA. See the GCS standard tender of service. The transit time. Small package transportation service provider. Transit. The small package access transportation service provider through that shown in the transportation service guide. The level of service provided. T. Permits of oversized and overweight motor shipments. The transportation service provider is required to obtain the necessary state highway permit shipments requiring them. The shipping activities must release oversized, overweight cargo shipments until the transportation service provider has notified and presented with the shipping activity written statement that they will and be obtained with required state road permits. The GSA DoD policy will comply with the state and local regulations, ordinance, and local authority regulations relating to vehicle size, weight limits, no vehicle movement exceeding the legal size, weight limitations, any other specific movements requiring the highway permits may be made over the public highways unless they have prior permission obtained with the appropriate state and local authority. The STDC Operational Theater Command will provide with the specific instruction of using official advisory messages, email assistance of any deviation, road permit requirements in situations involving national defense and emergency. The use of the transportation service provider equipment. The transportation officer and transportation agent will check the transportation service provider equipment to ensure the suitability and intent of the person. If the deficiency will be rejected. Will the equipment furnished that differs from the order of the equipment is accepted for the use of the service? The transportation officer or transportation agent shall ensure the billing and landing of the properly and noted with the equipment in order of the action is used to avoid the being charged with the delivery use of more expensive equipment with the shipper to deny needs to satisfy the shipment requirements. Shipments must be properly loaded, blocked, braced, and secured and prevented damage. For enclosed vans, the transportation officer and transportation agent will appropriately seal and lock the device of the transportation service provider equipment for the truckload shipments that require the exclusive use of the protective system and no seal numbers of the bill and landing. If the seal is removed from the transportation service provider, will notify the consignee and negotiating with the billing and landing will lose the seal numbers. Ensure the transportation service provider provide the copies of the appropriate shipment documentation. V. Loading and unloading responsibility, checking the appropriate SDDC rules, publication of the applicable tariff and tender, and determine loading and unloading responsibility rules obtained with the contract and the SDDC operations on the ETA website. See resources where tariffs and tenders require the transportation service provider to make cargo accessible to the tailgate offload vehicle. The transportation service provider as a liable personal injury, property damage. The government will be liable when the decision is made if it will perform the service of the reason for the expediency and conveniency. When the Department of Defense tenders are used to process shipment, loading, and unloading, the transportation service provider consider the accessory supply servicing additional charges apply. W. Lifting and tie-down procedures. Proper tie-down, lifting, and loading procedures are critical to ensuring the military cargo will be delivered on time without damage. Further guidance, see refer to DTR Part 2. Determining cargo weight using weight agreements. The transportation officer, transportation agent shall determine the actual weight of the shipment in accordance with the applicable weight arrangement. If the weight of the arrangement is not applicable to the weight shipment will be determined using the tariff. Actual weight of whichever is applicable for applying the freight rates. The actual cargo weight, including the inner package of the items, including weight of the surge pack of the tri-wall and other overpacks, hauling aids, and such pallets of size skids, unless otherwise specified in the weight of arrangements. The shipment activity must be created and maintain records in connection with the transportation service provider weight agreement. The record should include the weight, shipper's weight and certification, weight connection, verification, annual scale inspection. Authorized transportation service provider representatives will be allowed to inspect original records and verify the weight and description of commodities, certified bills of landing. Contact the SDDC operation 1-800-526-1465. Further explanation using applicable tariffs and weight agreements. For relocation activity, there are two basic options: movement of the government property associated with relocation of an office, district, or unit. The command may on its own behalf have an authorized procurement procedure entering the office of relocation contact and if it may request appropriate transportation management support activity under standard routine procedures practices to obtain necessary transportation accessorial services. Chapter 3. Special requirements for international commercial shipments, exports, imports, defensive transportation system shipments.